Okay, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما تعلمنا وزدنا بفضلك علما وتعليما إنك على كل شيء قدير. Okay, so we spoke last week at length um, about the development of Aqidah and about who the Ash'aris and Maturidis are. And we also spoke about how different groups look at themselves, right? So, Ibadis or slash Khawarij, they see themselves as the true followers of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Shia see themselves as the true followers of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. They also see themselves as a minority and they value being a minority, right? Being a minority is part of who they are. And they see that majority of the Sahaba and majority of the Ummah are wrong, right? So this method. This is a shared concept that the Khawarij and the Shia have, right? Then we mentioned these different groups that kind of developed over time. People following, so of the Jama'is, the people who are following the group, people who stuck to the Sunnah of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and initially had no codified, organized structure of Aqidah, right? It was just like, like Tajweed. If you just study Tajweed, just through recitation without going through the rules and without talking about it, it was like that. Just this is how you. This is what it is. So it's right because that's what the teacher said, right? There's no actual definition of what are the makharij and what are the rules of Tajweed. That's just how you do it, right? There was no system. And then we had Christians and other religions and various Muslims who engaged in totally deviant ideas, kufr ideas in reality. And then we had people in the middle who were the involved in apologetics, right? Trying to explain Deen to these people who are challenging it. Then we mentioned that group, the Mu'tazila, they eventually fell into errors such as denying magic, such as denying miracles, such as denying predestination, denying that you could see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then we had a reaction. Then that created in those who are following the Sunnah a reaction. Some of them coming out with tashbih, saying things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is like creation. Some of them saying that there's not only is there predestination, but rather we're forced to do things, etc. Right? And then the next stage reaction was to codify, to join these two camps, the camp of getting involved in apologetics and having a system, and the camp of Ahl Sunnah, and that created the Ash'aris and Maturidis, right? And we mentioned then that modern Salafis slash Wahhabis view that final stage as something wrong, and that Ash'aris and Maturidis are basically neo-Mu'tazila. They're the same thing. So what they're going to do then is take every single criticism in the past that was directed to anybody involved in Kalam, meaning the Mu'tazila, and you apply it to Ash'aris and Maturidis. When in reality, statistically, the Ummah has, for the last 1,000 years, has either been Ash'ari or Maturidi. You don't really find anybody else, right? The only other people then are Hanbalis. And we said even the Hanbalis, they are the same as the Asharis and Maturidis. They agree with them on the same points, but they just talk about it in a slightly different way. They have different, you could say, quote unquote, less refined, I'm sure they wouldn't appreciate that term, but less refined terminology, right? But they say the same things. So there is no fundamental difference between the Asharis and Maturidis and the Hanbalis. Yes, we mentioned some Hanbalis, because of the vagueness of the Hanbali school, fell into tashbih, fell into anthropomorphism as well. We spoke about that. But You know, and yes, we do find today some Salafis and Wahhabis, they will, because again they hold on to this unrefined stage, and they see that any refinement, any organization is becoming like the Mu'tazili. They stick to that unrefined stage, and also they fall into tashbih as well. So a Salafi Wahhabi today will not come along and say, I believe that Allah is like Allah. They're not going to say that. I know who the Mushabbiha are, they know who the Mujassima are, they know who the Anthropomorphists are. They're like, no, we're not them. They also know who the Khawarij are, and those who say that whoever does a major sin, they've left Islam. They know who they are, and they don't identify them. So a modern Salafi slash Wahhabi will say, I am not a takfiri, right? That's the word we have today, takfiri. Oh, you did this sin, you're not a Muslim, right? They do not, they're not the same thing. However, because they don't have a clear system, they do fall into tashbih, right? And then we also mentioned the concept of cherry picking, the general principle that they'll uh, um, pick and choose quotes. So, for example, Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, said that the Ummah has agreed that Allah is in the sky, right? And so the Asharis and Maturidis says, yeah, in the sense that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's power, and in the sense that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's knowledge, in the sense that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is above us, but not physically, of course, because Allah is not a physical object, right? So then a Salafi will come along today and say, look, Ibn Taymiyyah said that, and there's a hadith in Sahih Bukhari that says that, so that's true. In reality, the Hanbalis don't say that, or when they say that, they don't mean that, right? They mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's there in the Quran, and there's a hadith, we leave it as it is, but we know that Allah's not in space and time. So the Hanbalis, if you sat with them and studied them properly, they're saying exactly the same things as the Asharis and Maturidis. And even Ibn Taymiyyah, he says, but that doesn't mean that any part of the sky is above Allah. So Allah, أَأَمِنْتُم مَّن فِي السَّمَاءِ. Do you really, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Mulk, do you really feel safe from He who is in the sky? Right? And so he said, Ibn Taymiyyah, he says, yeah, but don't imagine that that means part of the sky is above Allah. So it means in, but it doesn't mean in. So when you say in, right, my, you know, I am inside this room, that means the room surrounds me. So even Taymiyyah says, yeah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in the sky. You have to say that. You can't not say that. But it doesn't mean that Allah's in the sky. That's what he says. That's basically what he means. Right? But out of adab, so the Ash'ari and Maturidis like just say what you want to say what you say. So it's okay. Like you can say that. You can say this metaphorical. The Hanbalis adab, and out of adab, they don't say things like that. They say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said that. It's true, but it doesn't mean this. Right? Even Imam Bayhaqi will say things like that as well. So the problem is then, because the Salafis, they are neither extension of the Maturidis or Asharis, nor they're an extension of the Hanbalis, they end up doing tashbih unintentionally. They end up doing anthropomorphism unintentionally. Okay, does that make sense? So Mu'adh, I'm not sure if you were here last week.
Yes, I watched the recording for last week.
I know, Mu'adh. Thank you. Was it?
Yes, I was here. I think we did the whole flow chart with the different groups.
Okay, great. Okay. So besides picking and choosing, what was it? Is it also true that some change entire parts of books? And that is unfortunately true, right? And so this is a shocking thing. You know, we always have husn al-dhan of people, right? And a lot of the time, think there's more husn al-dhan than needs to be there, right? I do not believe a Salafi is a bad person. I do not believe that a Wahhabi is a bad person, right? The person has ghairah, the person has jealousy for the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's it. It comes out sometimes in the wrong way, but that's something else, right? So we're not attacking the person, we're talking about attacking the idea. However, there's certain things that you just can't do, right? You can't change someone's book, right? So there's two things that will happen. One, much more than the other, is there's a book, okay? There's a book that's written by Farid Dingle. Okay, Badr, Ma'ab, Mu'adh, none of you agree with free dingle. So you print my book and then rip it apart in the side notes, right? For every single time I say something you don't agree with, you rip it apart. It, that's not totally wrong, but it is wrong in that just, you know, write an introduction, explain where my fundamental errors are, and then leave the book as it is. Like you don't need to keep rebutting what I say every 2 minutes. It's not very useful, right? So like a default thing that we're going to find throughout the world is that someone's going to, for example, in a PhD thesis, they worked on a manuscript of this, and it's a hadith book by some Ash'ari. So then every single time he mentions something they disagree with, he goes on a long tangent. It's just not useful. Like it's just kind of silly. It's like we obviously, it's like imagine, for example, if every single time you printed a book by a Mu'tazili, you start ripping it apart. It's like it's not really interesting. We already know you don't agree with them. I don't agree with them. Let's move on, right? So that's just kind of it's childish, but it's a whole thing, right? Um, that's one. And so you have to understand where the money goes, right? So in order to print this book, you're going to be funded by certain people, and if these people have an agenda, then that's what you're going to have to do, right? So basically, it's, you should either write your own book, right, or print the book as it is. Just don't do that. So, but that's not changing the book, though. That's just crowding it out with continual objections, which is kind of annoying. The other thing that does actually happen, right? The other thing that does actually happen is actually changing of texts, right? And so the idea is that basically here's a text. It contains, let's say in the introduction, at the end, it contains something that they consider shirk or they consider wrong. So you cut it out so that the readers don't get harmed by it. But again, that's not being it's not an amana ilmiya. You're not being like academically sound. Like you have to present the book as it is. So, whether you like it, you don't like it, what can you do? I'll give you an example. Um, Aisha Bewley, some of you might be familiar with her, translator. She translated a section on the Sahaba and Tabi'een of Medina, right? And from the Tabaqat of Ibn Sa'd. Tabaqat Ibn Sa'd, a large biographical dictionary. And so she has these sections of like, translate, these people of Medina. Okay. In it, there is a statement which is a bit shocking. Okay. In it, there are two statements I saw anyway that was a bit shocking. One of them was like this, that Ibn Umar once hit his wife so hard that something like some of her clothes fell off or something like fell off her, right? So is that content that you like to share with somebody? I mean, no Sahabi is perfect, but that's not really, you could say A, it's not relevant to me, and B, it's actually harmful. Why you even translate it into English, right? But imagine if she says, I'm going to translate the whole section on Ibn Umar, and then she cuts that out. It's not really fair then, is it? So she should then just do her own sketch of his life, selecting certain things and dropping certain things that aren't relevant to people or shouldn't be mentioned, right? But there's something called amana. Like if you're going to say it, say it. If there's information there that is awkward or strange or weird, then and either write your own book or tell me what's there, right? So this is unfortunately it does happen, right? It does happen that you see books that are things are cut out of books. I don't think that's going to be happening anymore though, because again, you have to understand where's the money coming from. The money's coming from certain people. There's funding for books, and so these books will come out, right? But if there's no funding or at all, then that idea. Maybe perhaps you could give an example. So I'm not familiar with it, right? Inshallah. Okay, but so what I want to understand then is who are the Asharis and Maturidis? Asharis and Maturidis, 99% of the Ummah. Basically, any scholar that you can think about is going to be Ashari Maturidi. That's the takeaway. Whether you agree with them or don't agree with them, that's something else. But they are basically 90% of the Ummah. When you say any scholar for the last 1,000 years. That's basically what we're talking about. Um, and yeah, and they don't have some kind of new aqidah. They just have organized aqidah. So the relationship of Ash'ari and Maturidi, Ash'ari and Maturidi is to the Quran and Sunnah what Ibn Jazari is to Tajweed, right? Or Ibn Mujahid or Ash-Shatibi, right? So here's a scholar comes along, organizes Tajweed for you. That's not a new Tajweed, is it? It's just organized. So, you know, that's what it is, just organized. So I come along and say, what are the attributes of Allah? 13. Okay, why'd you say 13? Well, we've been discussing this for a long time, and this is the exact list of how we describe what Allah is as opposed to what Allah does. So, okay, these are very advanced discussions. They've gone for a long time, and this is it. Okay, what do you say about prophets? I say these 4 things, or these 5 things. Okay, what do you say about this, 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 this? This is a list. It's a very refined list, right? And it's not ashwa'i, it's in Arabic. It's not like chaotic or like just general ideas that kind of that could be said. These are ideas that are very refined, right? But they're not contrary to the Quran and Sunnah. They're just organized, right? Okay, so let's quickly read this section and then move on, inshallah. So many sons of the Muslims are ignorant of the Ashari school, whom it represents and it positions on and its positions on doctrinal matters. Some of them are not God-fearing enough to refrain from accusing it of deviance, departure from the fold of Islam, and heresy regarding the attributes of Allah. The ignorance of the Ashari school is a cause of shredding the unity of Ahl Sunnah and dispersing its ranks. Some have gone as far as to consider the Asharis among the misguided and heretical sects, although I know not how the people of faith be linked with people of misguidance, or how Ahl Sunnah can be considered equal with the most extreme fractions of the Mu'tazila and Jahmiyyah. Right? So some of these things, some of it is a bit silly. It's a bit like like obviously not talking about something physical, but just like somebody can turn up in a country and say, "Oh yeah, we were originally here," right? It's a bit like that. Like somebody comes along and says, "Yeah, the people who were here before were not originally here." So it's a bit like that. So if you come onto the scene of academics in Islam, everybody's Ashari Maturidi. Sheikh Albani, rahimahullah, right, Salafi, he he has a lot of khidmah. He served the Sunnah a lot. Right? He did lots of work with hadith, right? So he pulled a lot. He printed a lot of manuscripts and worked with a lot of manuscripts. So one of the manuscripts he worked with was a Kitab al-Sunnah by Ibn Abi Asim. So Ibn Abi Asim, huge hadith scholar, 4th century, I believe, and he has a book called As-Sunnah, Kitab al-Sunnah. Okay, now this Kitab al-Sunnah has a chain transmission, right? Like everything has a chain transmission. So if you look at the end of the chain transmission, right, the way that this book has reached us, right, the way that this quote unquote Salafi book, because it's Kitab al-Sunnah describing, it's a book on Aqidah, right? As-Sunnah means Aqidah as opposed to Bid'ah, which means weird beliefs. So Kitab al-Sunnah by Ibn Abi Asim is a book on that can be easily used by Salafis to represent Salafi Aqidah because it is quote unquote unrefined. It doesn't list things in a kind of like logical framework. It just mentions hadiths, so they can be understood really in any way you want. The point is, here's this book which is being used to promote a certain Aqidah in a certain way, and it's being printed by this big Salafi scholar. How did the book reach you? The book reaches you through I'm pretty sure the last 2 people in the chain are Zakaria Ansari and then Shamsuddin al-Ramli. Shamsuddin al-Ramli, late Shafi'i, Sufi, Ashari. Right? That's who they are. And so this is the problem that they have, is that the Ummah has been taught, the Deen has been taught and preserved by people who are Ash'aris or Maturidis. They follow the form of Dhahib and they're all Sufis. That's the problem. That's the problem. Like everybody's like that. That's just like by default. So Indian subcontinent, Hanafi, Maturidi, Sufi. That's the last 500 years. That's all that's everybody are. Egypt, Levant, the Hanbalis, all Sufis, Ibn Taymiyyah, Sufi, everything like that. So there's a problem, right? When you come along and now you come along and say we don't follow the form of Dhahib, rather we follow Quran and Sunnah. We're not Ash'aris, Maturidis, or Hanbalis. We are Quran and Sunnah. Sufism is shirk and kufr and whatever. Then you have a problem in that the deen has reached you through these people. Like these are the commentators. Sheikh Albani as well. He did a printed the Mishkat al-Masabih by Tabrizi, non-stop referring to At-Tibi and others. So you're referring to scholars who are all Ash'ari or Maturidi. They're all Sufi and they're all following one of the form of Dhahib, because that's what everybody is. That's what everyone has been. So this is the problem that they have. So what they can there's different. They can either ignore it or try and reject it, but that's the case, you know. So the problem is like, yeah, it's like imagine, for example, you know, in 100 years, imagine like white Americans trying to say that they were originally here in America, right? And they rewrite history and say, well, Eric the Red, he was a Viking. He came to America a long time ago. We are his descendants. We were originally here. We've been, you know, it's like, what are you talking about? I mean, so what does that even mean? So it's kind of an insane thing to say, right? Does that make sense? The idea?
Yeah, it makes sense.
So what they can do is they can apply the Shi'i Khariji mentality is the real Sunnis have been an underdog for the last 1,000 years, right? So basically, while everybody was turning their back to the Quran and Sunnah and following this madhab and that madhab, we, whoever you are and wherever you come from, we've been here as underdogs. And while the Ahl Sunnah, everybody turned away from Quran and Sunnah and they became Hellenistic Muslims or something like that, crazy ideas, whatever, and denied things, we, whoever you are, we've been here the whole time, right? I mean, but the thing is, they don't have an existence. Like they're new, right? So it's like it's a new thing, right? So you just say like historic. And so this again, what's lost on so many people is just history, like. So your Salafi movement is a new movement. So what were you before? Like what was the Ummah before? The answer is from China to Spain, everybody was Ash'ari or Maturidi, or a few Hanbalis, right? And they were, which is basically the same. There's no difference. There's no fundamental difference. And following the form of Dhahib, and everybody was some form of Sufi in the sense of that people in general valued tasawwuf and spirituality in general, right? Either involved in a formal sense in some kind of tariqah, some kind of Sufi order, or not. But generally speaking, that's just like what everybody is. You know, Imam Nawawi, Ash'ari, Shafi'i, Sufi. He has a whole book on tasawwuf. You know, it's just like, so everybody's like that. You know, Imam Ghazali, right? So everybody's like that. There's no way to escape it. So this is kind of why it's kind of it's a little bit silly. Ibn Jazari. So we're going to study Tajweed. Okay, let's get rid of Ibn Jazari because he's a person of bid'ah. Right? He's Ash'ari, Shafi'i, Imam Shatibi, same thing. Maliki, Ibn Khaldun, Maliki. Everybody you meet, you talk about is one of the former Dhahib. All of them are either Ash'ari, Maturidi, or Hanbali. And again, I mentioned the key thing with Hanbalis is there's really no difference. It's just they have a semantic difference with us, right? So that's all. Okay. So it says the Ash'aris are the Imams of the notable figures of guidance among the scholars of Muslims whose knowledge has filled the world from both east to west. right? So if you again you go around and say, I don't want to read books by. So now there's a bit of hyperbole here, right? So you say, okay, Sheikh Farid, I respect what you're saying. That makes sense. The whole world was one thing, and then suddenly it changed. Okay, great. Is that true? But 100% true? Not really. Okay, so do you Ahl Sunnah? Do you ever quote books by quote hadiths or books by people of bid'ah? The answer is yes. Okay, so you in Bukhari and Muslim you'll find people of bid'ah who are narrating hadith? Yes. Okay, so you take their knowledge and you leave their aqidah? Yes. Aha, jazakallah khair. Do you ever quote scholars, right? Not just hadith, scholars who are Mu'tazili or Shi'i? So yes, we do. So meaning you take their knowledge, but you leave their bid'ah? Yes. There we go. You see my point? So now if I go to an extreme, say the whole world since the time of the Prophet ﷺ has been hardcore Ash'ari Maturidi, it's like, wait, that's a bit of extreme. It's not true. That's not true. Az-Zamakhshari, for example, major hadith tafsir scholar, right? We use him all the time. Uh, Abu Ubaidah, scholar of Arabic language. Use him. Qatada ibn Da'ama as-Sadusi, some strange ideas. Ikrimah, these are all hadith, these are like tabi'een that we take our knowledge from, right? Some people have crazy ideas. Ibn Khirash, Shi'i hadith scholar. We respect him, we revere him, he's very useful. Right? Ibn Jinni, Mu'tazili. I believe Al-Akhfash as well, Mu'tazili. Right? Many of the early grammarians are Mu'tazili. Certain Hanafis were Mu'tazili. Right? So they have a point. I don't want to go overkill and right. They have a point. But the issue is it's you what's fair is to be a revisionist Islam. That's totally fine, right? To say we have a new version of Islam, which is the revival of the earlier period of Islam, and we don't recognize the last 1,000 years. But in which case, don't recognize them at all. Like, just turn away from it totally. Turn away from it totally because it's just not really fair that you for example, you're going to quote here, for example, in hadith, let's quote Az-Zaylai, Hanafi, Maturidi. Oh, whoops. Let's quote Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani. You can't survive without Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani. Huge hadith scholar, commentator on, it's like, oh, yeah, but he has wrong. Whenever he says something crazy, we'll just point it out. But like he's saying things crazy in your eyes all the time. And so that's a problem. Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali, right? Sufi, you got problems. So the problem is like you're continually referring to people who disagree with you fundamentally. But then what you do is you hijack it and you say, I am the continuation of this, right? Which country? Imagine if you went to Israel, may Allah protect us, in 10 years and you ate maqluba, right? Who knows what maqluba is?
I do.
Yeah? Any Palestinians here? No? So maqluba is like a quintessential Palestinian dish, right? So you go to Israel and they're like, oh yeah, imagine for example, it's like, yeah, Israeli food. You're like, bro, it's not Israeli food, is it? That's Palestinian food. But they're like, no, we are, we are the people of this land. So it's our food, right? I saw something like that recently. It was like hummus or something like that. It was kind of silly, like literally stealing food, or like it was baklava, or I don't know what it is. Basically, like we are the new Levant. The Levant is us. So anything that's from Sham, Damascus, Lebanon, Palestine is actually ours. And it's like, no, it's not. Like, what are you talking about? But that's what's happening. That's what's happening. So it's just not fair. All right, it's just not fair. So, Allahu Alam. So anyway, whom people have unanimously agreed regarding their excellent scholarship and piety. They include the first rank of scholars from Ahl Sunnah and the most brilliant of their luminaries who confronted the excesses committed by the Mu'tazila. Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah said regarding them, Asharis and Maturidis, the scholars are the helpers of the religious sciences, and the Asharis are the helpers of the fundamentals of the religion. Quote Ibn Taymiyyah. Can you see the cherry picking? Right. They include whole sections of the foremost hadith scholars, sacred law, Quranic exegesis, such as Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, the mentor of the hadith scholars, the author of Fath al-Bari, which not a single scholar can dispense with, was an Ash'ari. The scholars of Ahl Sunnah, Imam al-Nawawi, author of Sharh Sahih Muslim, Ash'ari. The master of Quranic sciences, al-Qurtubi, author of Jami' Ahkam al-Quran, was Ash'ari. Shaykh Islam Ibn Hajar al-Haytami, Ash'ari. The Sheikh of Sacred Law and Hadith, Zakaria Ansari, Ash'ari, Abu Bakr al-Baqillani, al-Asqalani, al-Nasafi, al-Shirbini, Abu al-Hayyan al-Tawhidi, Ibn Juzay. It goes on and on and on and on and on. It's kind of be pointless, right? It's like saying that there aren't any mammals on Earth, right? Or for the mammals to come along and say, what are reptiles? They haven't been around for a long time, have they? Right. So again, Allahu Alam. So, mammals are a new thing, right? Compared to reptiles. So you come along and say, oh, what's this? Right. Or grass comes along and says, we are the main part of the ground. Trees are new, right? Who knows when grass evolved? You can ask Siri or Alexa or something. So look it up. How long has grass been along? How long have trees been around for?
There's around 100 million years for grass and 400 for trees.
There we go. So the grass says, I'm small, I'm part of the ground, everybody eats me. You trees are kind of extra. You probably develop later on, right? It's like, no, what are you talking about? So grass 50 to 100 million years ago, that's actually pretty recently. That's like the end of the dinosaurs, right? The evolution of sharks is, I don't know, something like they've been around to 400 to 500 million years, right? So sharks, so you come along and you just make a statement that would make sense to some people if you weren't aware of history. If you weren't aware of history, like, I mean, what's more primitive, grass or basic grass or a shark? So, well, shark, I don't know, it's in the sea. I don't live with it normally. It's a really big animal. Presumably sharks are new and grass is like old, it's old like the phrase old like the trees, right? But grass is fairly new on planet Earth, right? That's fairly new on planet Earth. It's not a fundamental thing, right? So this is the same idea. You come along and just restate things, right? And so again, the problem is that, and this is what I found, is like somebody coming from inside the world and outside the world. You say, give me all the books in Islam. Obviously, that you can't ever have all the books in Islam, but let's say get a huge library and just like color code Ash'ari Maturidi or not, right? It's gonna be, it's gonna be it's gonna be basically like 80, 90%, 99%. And the later it gets, it's all like that. Okay. So he says, how should Allah give us the benefit of their scholarship if we believe it is deviance and departure from the way of Islam? I ask you, is there a single Islamic scholar of the present day among the PhDs, geniuses, who has done what Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani or Imam Nawawi has done in service of the pure Sunnah? How can we dare charge them? And so again, it's not just a one-off thing. It's not just like, okay, there's one or two of them. It's like it's the vast majority. How can we dare charge them and all Ash'aris with deviance when it is we who are in need of their scholarship? right? So this is the general argument here. Facts lost in research. There are many matters that are subjects of research among the scholars of the area of doctrine, things that Allah Most High has not ordered us with. I am of the opinion that research into these matters removes the grandeur and splendor of the realities. So now I'm just talking about Aqidah. And so, so there's a bunch of things that you come along. Okay, we'll talk about this, Tawassul. Basically, imagine this. Somebody comes along and says, listen, tajweed, don't need it. Waste of time. They talk about all these terms and they're so complex and they're so weird. And half of it is just really to do with like anatomy. Look, they're talking about times of the sun. Did the Salaf talk about anatomy? No. Okay, khalas. Throw tajweed out the window. That is exactly the same analogy. Right? Tell me one person of the Salaf, okay, that used to recite Hafs and Asim. I don't know. Okay, there we go. Don't follow Hafs and Asim. So now I come along and I teach tajweed in a haphazard way, randomly. I've destroyed any sense of authority that you had in your mind. I guess this is an authority, that's authority. And I've made you think that anything that is complex is bad, right? Anything that's complex is bad. So now whenever there's just tajweed, you just take it without rules, right? And you just do what I do, okay? That's what happens. So you come along and they're like, oh my God, have you seen what these people in Aqidah talk about? They talk about weird stuff. They do talk about weird stuff, but it's still useful as part of their science, right? Just like in tajweed, we talk about anatomy. Why am I talking about anatomy? I don't really care about the mouth and the parts of the tongue and teeth and all these kind of things. What are you talking about? Why am I interested in that? I'm interested in Quran and Sunnah. I'm not interested in parts of your mouth. So the same thing, they talk about all sorts of random things and like, oh, look at these people talking about this. And he says, yeah, for the laity, for the average Joe, it isn't very useful to hear these things, and it does not benefit them. But that doesn't make it a bad science, right? And it even gets to the point with fiqh as well, like, oh, have you heard what the fuqaha talk about? They talk about crazy stuff. Fiqh is wrong. Okay, what's your substitute then for fiqh? Like, give me a substitute for the form of dhahib. Quran and Sunnah. That's not a substitute. Like, that's what we're looking at. That's not the conclusion we've drawn from it. I'm saying give me a conclusion that you've drawn from it that is a substitute. It itself. So that the thing being looked at and the conclusion you draw from it are not the same thing. Right? It's not actually the same thing. So anyway, so that's the basic thing we won't go through. So things about Tawassul. So Tawassul is asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by something, right? Many people err in their understanding of the reality of Tawassul. For this reason, we should clarify the correct understanding of Tawassul in our view. Before that, however, we must explain some realities. One, Tawassul is one of the methods of supplication, and it is a door among the doors to turning to Allah. The reality and primary intent behind supplication is Allah Himself. The one through whom Tawassul is performed is only an intermediary and a means to drawing closer to Allah. Whoever believes otherwise has fallen into idolatry. So you're not calling upon a person or a thing. You're calling upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Number two, the one who performs Tawassul does not perform it with a certain intermediate except due to his love for him and his belief that Allah loves him. If the opposite was shown to be true, then this person would be from the etc. Okay. Three, if one performing Tawassul believes that the one through whom he makes Tawassul unto Allah actually brings harm and benefit. So if you believe that the person or thing that you're doing Tawassul through actually brings harm and benefit by himself, independently, as Allah does, or even less than that, this person's done shirk. So I say, oh Allah, I ask you by the fact that I performed Hajj, even though it was financially crippling for me. Ya Allah, please cure my son. So do you believe that your Hajj can control Allah? Or do you believe that your Hajj can do things independently of Allah? If that's the case, it's shirk. Right? Or I ask you by the Mus'haf. Right? So you believe that the Mus'haf has secret powers besides Allah. Right? For Tawassul is not an obligation or a matter neither is it the response, etc. So it's not obligatory, nor will you nor is the response a condition upon it. So can you ask Allah without doing tawassul? Of course, right? So what is agreed upon concerning tawassul? He says, no one among the Muslims differs regarding the legality of tawassul unto Allah with righteous matters. Oh Allah, I ask you by the fact that I forgave this person, even though you know, oh Allah, how hard it was for me. Oh Allah, I ask you by my Hajj. Oh Allah, I ask you by this. Oh Allah, I just performed Ramadan. I ask you by the fact that I performed the Ramadan to do this. So whoever fasts, prays, reads the Quran, or gives charity. So in reality, anybody who does good deeds, like do good deeds, elbow Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala out of the way, astaghfirullah, and push you into Jannah. No. Okay, so whenever you do a good deed, you are using a good deed as a wasila, as a means. You're doing tawassul, you're using it as a means to go to Jannah. So anybody who does good deeds and doesn't just sit there and say, I'll just wait to see what Allah does with me, is doing tawassul. Right? But what we're talking about here is you're saying, oh Allah, I ask you by this. Right? Um, okay. Okay, so there's a famous hadith where there's these three people. The hadith of the three who are trapped in the caves. Are you familiar with that hadith?
Yes.
Badr, are you familiar with the hadith? The three people trapped in the cave.
I don't think so.
So that the Prophet ﷺ told us a story of these three people who were on a journey, and it was rainy, so they took shelter in a cave, and then a boulder fell down and closed the cave, so they couldn't get out. So they didn't know what to do, so they said, each of us will ask Allah by certain things that we've done, and to relieve us from this difficulty. So one of them said, "Oh Allah, I had a cousin that I loved like nobody has ever loved before, and I wanted to marry her, and she kept saying no and no and no. And then one day she was in a financial situation. And so she came up to me and she said, please lend me some money, right? Help me out. And I said, yes, on the condition you let me sleep with you, right? So then she says, okay. And they were about to do something haram. And just before they're about to do the haram, she said, like, fear Allah. And he said, okay. And he said, keep the money. And he said, and he didn't do what he was going to do. Right? So he said, oh Allah, by the fact that I turned away from zina, I ask you to relieve us from this plight. And the boulder moved a little bit, but not enough for them to leave. And then another one came along and said, Ya Allah, where's the hadith? What was the rest of it? There was that one. There was the, you put it on the group? I just closed my WhatsApp because somebody called me. The other one was,
The parent.
I couldn't have children? Oh yeah, the parents one, yeah. So then he said, "Oh Allah, I had two parents. I used to be really good to them, and then once I came home and I came home and I milked the sheep to give some milk to my parents, and they had already fallen asleep. So I stood there waiting the whole night for any time that they might wake up and they might want the thing that I was there for, right? And I didn't even give it to my kids because I didn't want to disturb their sleep. I didn't want to prefer anything to anyone to them, right? So I was really, really careful, um, um, about respecting them and their needs. So, oh Allah, because I did this for your sake, please save us from this thing." And then said the boulder moved a little bit. And then the other one was somebody who had owed somebody some money. So this person had done some work for him, and he hadn't paid him yet. So and then he left. He hadn't seen him for ages. So he kept that money for him, and he invested it in plants and in cows and flocks, etc. And he kept looking after that money, the cattle and the sheep, for that person until, intending that whenever he sees him, he's going to give it to him. And so by the time that person came back years later, those sheep had multiplied and the cows had multiplied and all those, it was a ridiculous amount of money basically. And so he could have taken it, he could have lied about it, he could have this, but he said, I did this for the sake of Allah, fearing of the right that was upon me. And so I looked after this for your sake of Allah. Because I did this for you, Allah, and because of my sincerity, please relieve us. And then the boulder moved, right? I think I mixed up the order slightly. But the point is, they asked Allah by something created. I ask you by this deed. Now, this is a key thing to understand. Many people, in fact, most people, are incapable of thinking in an abstract way. Most people, or if right, are incapable of thinking in an abstract way. So I say, for example, what does that mean? Ask 90% of the world, what does it mean to think in an abstract way? They don't actually know what that means. They don't understand. So you think, for example, you talk to people and you think, oh, it's because they don't understand Arabic, maybe, or they don't understand English. In fact, they don't understand anything. Right? They don't actually understand anything. So this is a major cause, and one of the whole things about Ash'ari, Maturidi, etc., is that people are just not very intelligent. And so what happened in the past was, we talk about, right to education, etc. Everybody has a right to education, but when you get into ulum, like they're hard. And so most people can't do this stuff, right? Most people can't actually do ulum because they're just simply not intelligent enough. There's not a bad statement about them. It's just the fact that they're just not intelligent, like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hasn't given that rizq. So what happened in the past in that uh, meritocratic world, or let's say elitist world, it is elitist, right? In an elitist world of academics, only people who are intelligent were allowed to talk, right? Only people who are intelligent were allowed to talk, and only people who are specialized were allowed to talk. In today's world, we let people talk even though they're not intelligent. In today's world, we let people talk even though they don't understand things. So, for example, I come along and they say, somebody, the proof for being able to do tawassul through a created being is this hadith. And I say here, they made dua through something created. We say, but the difference is one is an action and one is as a person. So yeah, but there's no difference because they're both created. And I say, no, this is shirk. If you say, oh Allah, I ask you by Prophet Muhammad, or I ask you by Abdul Qadir Jilani, or for example, or Allah, I ask you by your love of my father, who's a righteous person, I ask you to do this. This is shirk because you're worshipping that person. And so what you will see this if you go online, right, and listen to these discussions, you will realize after a short time that some people are just unintelligent. Like they're not actually intelligent. And this is what Imam Shafi said, this very key thing. He said, I never debated with an intelligent person, save that I won the debate. And I never debated with an ignorant person except that he beat me. Because they actually don't know how to play chess. Like they don't actually understand what's being said. Because they're not actually able to think in an abstract sense. And so they might, for example, have understood certain paradigms and they can apply those certain paradigms, but they don't actually understand what those paradigms are. Right? They don't actually understand what that is. Like, for example, this hadith is sahih, so and so and so and so and so. So they have certain things. If this, they might know certain subtleties, but they understand like what does the sahih hadith mean? Right? Or who made that sahih? Or whose conditions are those? Like they don't actually know what that even means. And they're not able to do that. So they have a certain simple way of thinking and they can't actually get out of it. Like imagine, for example, you can't think about race or class. You can just think about white and black, but you don't understand race as a concept. They can't actually think on that kind of level. and they're not able to come back and kind of analyze things like that. So, so this is what you will find. Somebody will say something very simple, and it's very easy, unbelievably simple, but they actually really just don't understand anything abstract because they can't see abstract things. Does that make sense? So what does that mean? It means debate is fairly useless with 99% of people because they're not actually intelligent enough to debate, right? And so the only way to remove this is to keep talking, keep spreading the knowledge, and bit by bit, right? Certain governments stop funding certain people, and then it's like, oh, it's kind of obvious. Like that's just understood now. But the masses, here's the problem: the masses can be moved very easily. So you can change the masses from Sunni to Shi'i very easily, and from Shi'i to Khariji very easily, because they have no knowledge and no intelligence, right? And so we like to think of the world as everybody could read and write and everybody studied. That's not actually the case. Is most people were religious in the past and they revered ulama and they understood ulama are ulama and people are not ulama, and that's basically it. And then as long as the ulama were in charge, then there's knowledge that spread. And as long as the juhal come along, then suddenly it goes crazy. Go ahead, Mu'adh.
Assalamualaikum. I had a quick question, and maybe the second one is connected to it. When we make tawassul through the Prophet ﷺ, is it out of our love for him? Is it his rank with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? What is it exactly? And then the second part is if it's Allah's love towards someone, is that different? Because that's not a created thing now. So I just wanted clarification.
Exactly. So that's not even a created thing. So anyways, the point is, what we're not doing is, oh Allah, I know you, I know how to get you. I know how to bend your arm. I ask you by this, and I know you can't say no to this, right? So can you bend Allah's arm? Astaghfirullah. No. So you say, Allah, you love this deed. Oh Allah, this is something sacred in your eyes. I ask you, you know, buy this thing. That's what it is. Does that answer your question? So it's not our love for the Prophet ﷺ. It's you ask Allah by his love for the Prophet ﷺ, or you ask Allah by the Prophet ﷺ.
Is our love for the Prophet ﷺ not the same as a good deed, like Ramadan or Hajj or
Exactly.
something?
That's why it's all the same. But the point is people, it's the same, it's all the same. Like, it's the same discussion. But people can't see it like that. They can't see it like that. They see it as don't bring somebody else into worship of Allah. Bringing somebody else into worship of Allah is shirk. Okay. Here's a classic question, right? Classic question. They say, if I ask you to do sujood to me right now, would that be shirk? They'd be like, of course. Definitely say, yeah. Definitely. So doing sujood to a person is shirk. Yeah. Okay, what about doing sujood to a tree? Of course. Okay, what about doing sujood to a building? Of course. Shirk. Okay, what about doing sujood to the Kaaba? Oh, iman. How did it suddenly change from iman to shirk? What was the thing that changed? Oh, it's different. Okay, how is it different? It's different. One's legislated. Like that's what changed it? Like one was legislated. So if Allah legislates shirk, it's okay. If he doesn't, it's not okay. Is that how it works? Or is it the niyyah and the i'tiqad? Is it what your intention was and what you believed? Oh, yeah. Okay. So if you did sujood to a human being, okay, with a gun at your head, for example, would that be shirk? No, it would be wajib. Okay. What if you did it as a joke, right? Umar, for example, he makes the best maqluba in the world. And so everyone does sujood to him and say, oh, holy maqluba maker. We all do sujood to. That's haram, but it's not shirk, is it? Right? You say, yeah, but the fuqaha say you have to execute him. That's true. You have to execute him because outwardly this person is a kafir. Outwardly, if you did sujood to somebody as a joke, that is haram, A, and B, it is you are outwardly labeled as a kafir, and this person you have to be executed unless you make tawbah. So, but it's not actually shirk, right? It's not actually shirk, right? So the difference between the Sayyidina Yaqub doing sujood to Sayyidina Yusuf, right? Does that make him a mushrik? Say no, okay, because it was legislated or because he had a different intention, right? Does that make sense? So the problem is they're not able to think on that abstract level, right? It's like witchcraft, like the witch hunt, right? It's like you don't know the difference between technology and magic because I don't know, like you can't think on that level. So it's just everything's it's like shirk and so magic and technology are the same. Shirk and barakah are the same. It's just so again, it's for the layman, it's not their fault. For the layman, many people just can't do that, right? But the problem is the empowerment of ignorance. That's the problem. The empowerment, and then we have to waste our Sunday morning, this is all a waste of time. Like all of these things, like notions that need to be corrected. Why do they need to be corrected in the first place? Right? It's like somebody saying, I don't believe in paternity. Like, what do you mean you don't believe in paternity? Like, there's this guy, he keeps following me around, calling me my dad. I don't believe in that. Like, I don't identify as, like, I don't identify him as my dad. And you're like, is this a stupid argument, or is this like, are we actually talking here? This person's literally talking, and then it's a whole movement. Like gender. Why on earth are we wasting time talking about gender? I mean, I can understand you want to do whatever you want, but it's a waste of time. So these are all like wastes of time. But the problem is you empower people of ignorance, the ignorance gets spread, and then we have to spend 50 years undoing it. Right? So let's just go another 5, 10 minutes. I know we have another class. I don't know who's in my Badr. Could you send a message in the other class?
Yeah.
Yeah, Bismillah. Okay, go ahead, Bismillah, Ashar.
Shaykh, what's the difference between tawassul and istighatha?
Okay, there's a big
Is it the
difference.
same or
We'll talk about that next week, inshallah. I don't want to go into that right now.
okay?
Yeah. So it says the area where people differ in the issue of tawassul is tawassul with other than the deed of one performing it, such as tawassul through things and people by saying, "Oh Allah, I seek I seek a means to you by the way of your Prophet Muhammad," or "I seek a means to you by way of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq," etc. Right? Um. Okay. Uh, so tawassul through the Prophet ﷺ before his existence. So okay. So this hadith here, by the way, just put a little footnote here, is arguably fabricated, right? So I'm not sure why the author put it here, but this hadith here, this is arguably fabricated. So just put a little note there. So using that is not particularly useful. It just makes the whole situation more complex. He talks about it here, but just ignore it because it just makes things more complex. Here we go. It was rejected and declared fabrication by the likes of Imam Dhahabi and others. Some scholars declare it weak, while it's okay. Just ignore it. That's not particularly useful because there's so many other things. Others supporting hadith from the Prophet ﷺ, Ibn Taymiyyah, so that's the whole point. Here's Ibn Taymiyyah narrated 2 hadiths on the subject and brought them in order to use as examples. He said, mentions the chain transmission. He says, O Messenger of Allah, when were you a prophet? He replied, when Allah created the earth. And then he said, he wrote on the leg of the throne, Muhammad is the messenger of Allah, seal the prophets. And then Allah created the garden in which He made Adam, etc. When Allah the Exalted breathed life into him, he looked at the throne and saw my name, whereupon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala informed him that He is the master of all descendants. When Satan deceived them both, they repented and sought intercession by to him and by my name. Right? Tawassalu bismi. Right? Same thing here. So these are all evidence that you can do that. Right? I say this proves that according to Ibn Taymiyyah, the hadith is suitable for use as evidence and is given consideration. Again, we're going to delete that from Ibn Taymiyyah because Ibn Taymiyyah is also not Salafi. So there's a problem. Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah, not Salafi. Ibn Taymiyyah, not Salafi. So it's a problematic. Ibn Taymiyyah's correction of the meaning of this uniqueness. Sheikh Ibn Taymiyyah spoke very well and beautifully about this issue, etc., and explained it. So he explains it all here. You can read that. So then again, he says, an important analysis concerning the opinion of Ibn Taymiyyah that has been absent from the minds of his followers. So again, they're not actually followers of him. They're cherry picking from him. This is the whole problem, right? It's just cherry picking. So they come along, right? And they say, oh, it's like their version of the deen is just something new. Just like Shi'i is not really the same as Shi'i. Shi'i in the first 2 centuries is very different to Shi'i now. There's a huge difference. So concerning it, there is the hadith of we mentioned that. Here is Sheikh Ibn Taymiyyah saying that these words have a correct understanding. How does this compare to the one who goes into an uproar and expels those who agree with him from the fold of Islam and describes them as misguidance? Right. So again, the same kind of idea. Third hadith is there. Fourth is there. Etc. Conclusion. The conclusion is that the hadith is authentic. I'm going to skip to these things. So basically, we're not worshipping anybody by doing that. These are established. The Jews doing tawassul through him. So they كانوا يستفتحون, right? They used to يستفتحون, seeking fath through him, right? When this prophet comes, he will be this means. And so this is again a very simple thing. What do you believe? So who guides the Prophet ﷺ or Allah? So well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides through the Prophet ﷺ. That's shirk. Okay, well, that's not, so there's actual means and then apparent means. So Allah is the ultimate cause and everything else is just apparent causes. This is a simple thing like that. During his life, again, through him on the plains of Judgment Day, etc. Legality of Tawassul according to the methodology of Ibn Taymiyyah. Shaykh Ibn Taymiyyah in his book, The Noble Principle, concerning a Tawassul and means, he says, seeking a means of approach to Allah is only achieved by one who performs Tawassul to Allah through his own faith in Muhammad and following him. This Tawassul through faith in him and obedience to him is obligatory, so finding a way to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through believing in Prophet Muhammad and through following him. Tawassul through faith in him and obedience to him is not lifted but from any one of the creation, etc., etc., etc. All praise be to Allah. As for Tawassul through faith in Him, love for Him, obedience for Him, sending prayers and peace upon Him, and through His supplications and intercession and His likes from His own actions, and the actions of the servants that are ordered with respect, then this is Islamically legal according to the agreement of Muslims. Okay. The legality of Tawassul through the Prophet from specifically according to Imam Ahmad ibn Taymiyya. Right, so this is this hadith here. This hadith is very important hadith. This is, you can just take this hadith and everything kind of is understood. Ibn Taymiyyah quotes this hadith in Al-Kalim al-Tayyib. Imam Ahmad quotes this hadith, etc. So it says, similarly, what has allowed as well is tawassul through him in supplication, as well as the hadith narrated by Tirmidhi and authenticated by him. The Prophet ﷺ taught someone to say, "Oh Allah, I ask you, Allahumma inni as'aluka wa atawassalu ilayka bi nabiyyika, Nabi Rahma, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Ya Muhammad tawajjahtu ilayka." Yeah, so you're now talking to all the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and this is this juncture Azhar between istighatha and tawassul. Now I'm talking to the Prophet Muhammad and saying, I turn to you, turn through you, lowercase, unto your Lord, so that He may fulfill my need and relieve it. Right. So may Allah, He may allow you to intercede on my behalf. Right. This is called tawassul. Right. So this is what Ibn Taymiyyah says. So Ibn Taymiyyah has no issues with these things. And then Al-Shawkani and other people. Yeah, Muhammad ibn, so again, the same thing. Muhammad ibn Wahhab permits tawassul, etc. Was asked about istisqa, seeking rain. There's no problem in performing tawassul through the righteous. Again, he responded, these kind of things. So again, all of these things are kind of, they're not, it's not Ibn Taymiyyah, it's not Imam Ahmad, it's not even Muhammad ibn Abd Wahhab. It's just a development things. Muhammad ibn Abd declared this disavowal of those who impute disbelief upon those who perform tawassul. Right. So in Sheikh Muhammad ibn Abd's letter addressed to the people of Qasim, he strongly rebuked those who linked him to imputing disbelief, takfir, upon those who do tawassul. He said, Suleiman Suhaim invented things against me that I have not said, most of which he never even crossed my mind. From those that I say that people who do tawassul through the righteous are kuffar, that I say that Imam Busiri in his poetry, in his the Burda, right? That I burn the Dalal al-Khairat, for example. All of these things, these things are not some things that he said anyway. So his relics, inshallah, we'll continue with this. So relics, the same thing. So you have something sacred, and we go and we find people doing that many times. Relics, meaning like tabarakat, things that have, so again, this is very shirky for them. Like, oh my God, the shirk. You have a hair of the Prophet ﷺ, you have something the Prophet ﷺ touched, you have a piece, something from a Mubarak place, and we see that the Salaf spoke about this at length, and we spoke about this last week as well, I believe. So we'll linger longer on this, I think, because it's just important to repeat some of these things. So we'll come back to this inshallah next week. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه سبحان الله وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك.